In 1939, Poland was situated between two evil forces. On its eastern side was the Soviet Union, and their leader was Joseph Stalin, and he killed over 1 million people. On Poland's western side was Nazi Germany, and their leader was Adolf Hitler, and he killed over 1 million people. And what's interesting is in 1939, both those countries wanted to invade Poland. And what people didn't realize is that they were afraid of each other. So secretly, they signed a non-aggression agreement between each other so that the Soviet Union would not defend Poland when Germany attacked. But then Germany would agree not to attack the Soviet Union for 10 years. And not only that, but they also agreed to split Poland in half. And no one knew this. So that the Soviets would take one half and the Nazis would take the other half. So with this agreement in place, the Germans attacked Poland and World War II started. And what's interesting is that the Soviets, people thought the Soviets were going to attack the Germans, but they didn't. They stopped at that line and let the Germans keep the other half. But during that time, and when the Germans attacked, the Poles did defend themselves heroically, but they were no match to the Germans. However, one officer who fought with distinction was Captain Witold Pilecki. I might have trouble with that name all day today. Captain Pilecki was a man of principle, he was very patriotic, and he was a family man. However, no matter how much he loved his family, he loved his country more. And even though he was undeterred that they could not defend Poland, he wanted to see a free Poland, and he would do whatever he could to be able to free Poland. And one thing he did do was found the Polish Free Army with another officer that would fight the Germans and later the Soviets over the next 5 years. What's interesting is that during the time the Germans started there was a prison camp being built outside of Krakow. And a lot of the resistance fighters were being sent down there, but they didn't know a lot about that prison camp. So Captain Pilecki thought it would be a great idea if he would go and infiltrate that prison camp so that he could gather intelligence and create a resistance network. His superiors thought that's a great idea, but it's tremendously dangerous. He was likely to die. And what he didn't realize is that prison camp was really the concentration camp, Auschwitz. So he volunteered to go to Auschwitz. But to get into Auschwitz was difficult because he would have to have a fake name, and then he would have to go to a roundup. And when you go to a roundup, one of three things can happen. You could be either shot and killed immediately, you could be sent to a slave labor camp in Germany, or you could be sent to Auschwitz. Fortunately or unfortunately, he was sent to Auschwitz. And within the first 2 days, he realized this may have been a mistake because he was beaten up, his clothes were taken, and his hair was all cut off. And he realized the first thing when he wrote about it, that the first troubling part was all the law and order was definitely taken away, and this was certainly not a prison camp, it was a death camp. He spent 3 years in Auschwitz, and during that time he gathered a lot of intelligence that was sent to the Allies. He built a resistance network that was over 1,000 strong, but he built it in a smart way. He built it in groups so that if anyone got captured, they wouldn't give up the network, they would only give up the group, because it was very dangerous work in the camp. And he also prepared everyone for a fight, because he truly believed that the intelligence that he would gather would be so appalling that the Allies would attack the camp. which inevitably never happened. And what's interesting is that he gathered a lot of information, and even though he wasn't outside the camp, he could tell what was going on in the war. Because in 1940, he noticed in his network that only Polish officers were getting executed. By 1941, he started noticing Soviet soldiers being exterminated. And he reported that to the Allies. And then it was not until the end of 1941 that the Jews were coming in to be exterminated. And he had all this data. And what's also interesting is as he was collecting this data, he almost died twice, once of typhoid and once of pneumonia. And when you're in a camp like this, you can't like take a day off, because if you show any weakness, they'll just kill you. And what's interesting, another thing I didn't say, is that within the first 2 days, he was just standing at a muster, and the Germans just killed 10 people for no reason right around him. And he was the only one who survived. And little did they know who he was. If they known that he was an officer, they would have killed him. Now, the way that Captain Lipinski would send the information to the Allies was very interesting. First, he sent it through prisoners who were released, but that was only in the beginning, because after a while, they didn't release anybody. He also gave his Lipinski reports to people who escaped. The interesting thing there was only 20% of those who attempted actually made it, except for one famous one, where 4 Polish prisoners just wanted to escape, so they broke into the storeroom where the Germans kept all their uniforms, put on SS uniforms, also had weapons, stole the commandant's car, because it was the fastest car, drove through Auschwitz, Heil Hitler and everybody. But their concern is when they got to the gate, they wouldn't open the gate. So one of the Polish prisoners was a Boy Scout who knew German and yelled at the guard, "You better open it up or I'll open you up like a can of tuna," or something like this. And the guard was so startled because he thought he was getting a command for the commandant. They opened the door, they drove through the gate, and they were free and never found by the Germans. And then they had all of Lipinski's reports with them when they did that. So that was the second way. And the third way is they actually put together a radio, and they sent it to radio, and they sent messages to the English government, which was very, very interesting. But the thing is, when the Allies got all this information, they didn't believe them. They said it was too extraordinary. There couldn't possibly be these many people dying, and they were. And they couldn't possibly be experiments and all this other stuff. So they thought he was exaggerating. And they weren't going to send any soldiers to rescue them. And he was very upset at that. He thought the government and the Home Army was a bunch of wimps. So he realized that he was better off to help the free Poland, not to be in the camp, but to be outside the camp. So he was going to have an escape plan. But the thing was, there were 7,000 soldiers around Auschwitz. How would he do this? He got reassigned to a bakery that was just outside the gate at night. Him and his 2 fellow prisoners overpowered the guard, cut the phone line, ripped down the back door, and ran into the woods. And all the Germans were chasing him and shooting him, but they were so desperate to get out that they were never caught. So he actually escaped, was one of the few who actually escaped. And he went all the way to Warsaw eventually, and was part of the Warsaw Uprising, where they lost. And he became again a POW sent to Germany, and he was ultimately released by the Allies to Italy to be with his family. Now he could have stayed there. Once the Germans were out of, once the Germans were out of Poland, the Soviets came in and they put in a puppet government. So they asked, the Free Army asked again Captain Lipinski to go back and gather intelligence. And the puppet government actually captured him, put him through a trial, convicted him of being a German sympathizer, believe it or not, and sentenced him to death, which is unbelievable. And 10 days before he died, oh, this is him in prison, and this is him when he was in the trial. And 10 days before he died, he said to a fellow prisoner, "I tried to live my life so in the moment of my death I would feel joy rather than fear." And on his deathbed, when they killed him, they just shot him in the head, it was said the last thing he said was, "Long live free Poland," kind of like a William Wallace-esque. But what's interesting is they killed him, and then they erased any mention of him, and they censored him. So that if you mentioned his name in communist Poland, you could be shot in the spot. And it wasn't until 1989 that he was recognized for who he was and became a hero of Poland. So Witold Pilecki will forever be known as the man who volunteered to go to Auschwitz. But I think it's so much more. I think his greatest contribution was his inspiring patriotism in the face of adversity. He sacrificed his life. He sacrificed his life for others and for his country. And yes, he has been recognized as a true hero of Poland. But I believe he should be recognized as a true hero of humanity in the face of evil. Mr. Toastmaster.